Parasite, from 1982, takes place in a post-apocalyptic 1992. I always love outliving dates in movies. Like, we lived through 2015 and there's no hoverboards or DeLorean time machines. Anyway, in tonight's movie Parasite, and you're not going to believe this, there's a parasite! Like I mentioned, we're in a post-apocalyptic future. It's never flat out said, but it seems to be due to some nuclear disaster. Now, rations are tight, and everyone's just fighting for survival. There seems to be two classes: the merchants, who make people work in camps, and then the folks who just live out in the country on their own. One guy who works for the merchants is Dr. Paul Dean, and right now, he's developing a parasite, something that they want to help them win a war. As soon as he found out their dark intentions, he abandoned the project, but not before being attacked, and one of his own creations latches onto him, infecting him. However, it would seem like Paul is able to escape, because now he's out driving around, looking for a place to finish his work and save his own life. He first comes across a couple of guys doing, bad things to a girl. Paul jumps up to save her, a fight breaks out, but eventually Paul's the victor. He frees the girl, but then she attacks him too. Okay, a simple thank you would have been nice. Outside, Paul meets a guy named Buddy, who calls those people sickies. I guess that's a side effect of the radiation? I'm not really sure. And it's never brought up again. Paul and Buddy talk a bit, but seeing that Paul's sick and not wanting to infect anyone else, he goes on his way, only to be attacked once again. This time, a rattlesnake joins in on the fight, and Paul finishes him off with a pipe. Not getting any help there, he moves on to Joshua, a small town with only a few survivors, but the supplies he needs to continue his research. First, he stops to get some gas, which is $40 a gallon? Ouch! You won't hear me complaining about gas prices again. He pays in silver, then goes into town looking for a room, where he meets Miss Daly. She has a place for him, and all he has to do is give up his gold ring for a couple nights stay at her house. It's interesting that paper money means nothing anymore.
We use that for wallpaper around here.
Fact really does mirror fiction. Meanwhile, another guy, who we later find out is Wolf the Merchant, pulls up in a Lamborghini looking for Paul. Speaking of Paul, he's getting some food at a local bar, chatting with Collins, the owner. Just then, a rough-looking crowd comes in, looking to cause some trouble. The leader of this group is Rickus, who used to work for the merchants in their work camps.
I work for the big business boys. They gave me that.
After messing with Paul, Rickus causes a ruckus with Patricia, another local who seems to be a bit of a farmer. This time, Collins steps in to calm things down, but that doesn't really work out for him. There's a lot of talking back and forth, but in the end, nothing really happens. So we're back to messing with Paul. You just know that these guys are going to get their comeuppance. But how? Well, they break into Paul's room and trash the place, eventually finding a very important canister. Paul warns them not to open it, but who can resist? And Rickus makes his lackey, Zeke, take a peek. And that's when the parasite attacks. In theaters, this would have been in 3D, and I think the effect would have worked here. Upset with what just happened, Rickus attacks Paul and leaves him for dead. Luckily, Pat picks him up and nurses him back to health. While he's on the mend, Wolf is hot on his trail, talking to everyone that he's met before, and not being as nice as Paul was. Using his crude but effective interrogation techniques, Wolf figures out where Paul's staying. Just then, Paul comes home. He's worried, knowing that a merchant would be after him. So he decides to move his headquarters over to Patricia's house for the time being. But now, Wolf the merchant knows where he's headed. At Pat's, Paul explains that he created a new strain of parasite, and it lives inside of him. In order to find the cure, he needs to have another one to study, and the only other one in the world now lives on Zeke. So, how is our little friend doing? Oh, not so well, I see.
Jesus.
But what about the parasite? It's on the run and makes its way over to Dana's bed. She tries to get away slowly, but it still latches on. Paul continues his work, but he's looking pretty bad, forcing him to use a syringe, which seems to control the parasite within him. Rickus takes Dana to Collins for help and to get her comfortable. They know that their only hope is Paul. Wolf shows up at Pat's looking for the parasite, but her lips are sealed.
Now where is he?
Just then, Rickus shows up, starting a fight with the merchant. Looks like he wins too, but he doesn't finish the job, leaving it open so he could make an escape later on. Paul finds Pat laying on the floor and helps her to her feet. He now knows 100% that Wolf is looking for him. But he does have some good news. He discovered that it's sound that kills the parasite. He just needs to know the right frequency, so he still needs a sample from the other one. Dana finally succumbs to the infection, and it moves on, attacking Miss Daly from the ceiling. Again, in 3D this would be pretty cool. And the practical effects aren't half bad either. Paul and Pat arrive just a little too late, but at least they're able to get the sample they need. Paul gets to work right away, tuning to the correct frequency, forcing the creature out of him. It latches onto Pat, but then quickly dies. All they have to do now is kill the final parasite, which Wolf won't allow. Just like in the beginning, when Paul was fighting that sickie, the rattlesnake joined in. This time, it's the parasite that latches on. Thankfully to Wolf, who runs outside, falls off a balcony. Pat lights a propane tank on fire, causing an explosion and killing both Wolf and the parasite. And that was Parasite. What'd you think? I'm kinda split. On one hand, it had a lot going for it. The music was good. It almost made the movie feel like a 50s creature feature. I liked that. Also, the practical effects were great. Probably because Stan Winston worked on them. The second half of the movie's not bad. It's just the beginning that just drags everything down with it. It's all pretty confusing, really, in the end, which I think is on purpose. The audience is supposed to be wondering what is going on, and we learn as we go. But typically, post-apocalyptic movies have an explanation as to what happened in the very beginning. A credit scroll, something that gets us up to speed. You know, movies like Terminator and like every Star Wars film. Here, there's nothing. And what's up with the sickies? What's the lore behind the world? We're never told a thing. Originally, they wanted this to be sort of a remake of The Tingler. I can see that with the creature design. And remember, The Tingler had the gimmick of having little motors on theater seats that would vibrate. What's this movie's gimmick? The 3D, of course. And although I didn't see it in 3D, they certainly took advantage of the technology. The acting's fine, and it's fun to see Demi Moore in an early role, but I really doubt you'd think she would become the star she is today just by watching this movie. Parasite probably isn't worth your time. A decent ending doesn't make up for the boring first half. I give it 1.5 1974 Lamborghini Countach LP 400s out of 4.
Nobody comes around much anymore. That's why I'm not wearing much makeup. Anyway, who can afford it these days?